Hi, and welcome to the world of PHsPeed. My name is Rosie, and in this series of videos, I will introduce PHsPeed version 2.0. PHsPeed is a low-code platform. You can realize a lot of your project without even writing a single line of code. This short video will introduce a new feature, namely a chain dropdown. When a user selects a value in a drop-down box, it will change the values of another drop-down box. You can see the effect here. Changing the country will change the states. So how do you create this? First, I create a simple form from a table that contains a country and a state field. PHsPeed tries to find the correct field type, but it cannot detect drop-down fields. So a regular edit field is generated, and I change this into a drop-down field. I add two table components, one for the country, and one for the states. As the binding between a DB table component and the field requires a data source, I also add two data sources. I need to set up a few things to make the form work. First, I need to apply a database table to the table components. I also need to assign the DB table component to the data source. When I changed the data fields, the primary data source was automatically assigned. The drop-down shows me all the available tables, and I have to define the data field for the drop-down field. This complete process is explained in detail in the video about form applications. For clarity, I change the names of the components to reflect the tables. I completed the lookup fields and lookup tables setup, but I haven't applied the lookup tables to the drop-down field. The drop-down field has a lookup data source and a couple of properties to make a mapping between the original table and the lookup table. First, I need to describe which data field is going to be displayed in the lookup. I need to define the key used and map the original table foreign key and the lookup. That completes the setup of the lookup for the drop-down field. Of course, I need to apply that to the country and the state drop-down. Next, I generate the code and run the application to see if I have made any mistakes in the configuration. But all looks well. The only thing left to do is to bind the states drop-down to the country drop-down. For this, there is the master lookup and master lookup mapping property. I need to apply drop-down one that contains the countries as the master lookup, and allocate the country ID field as the field to pass to the states drop-down if the country is changed. So what happens here is that both fields are initially filled with the full result of the allocated table. As soon as the user changes a value of the first drop-down, then the country ID is passed to the states field. This key value is then used to filter the values of the states drop-down and show only the states that belong to the country. So let's summarize. To create a chain dropdown, you must put two dropdown components on the form and bind them to the data source and field of the primary table. In this sample, this is the address table. Then add two DB table components and bind them to the lookup database table. Add a data source and bind it to the DB table component. In this sample, the country and states table. Then supply the field to display, the field that is the key, and map this to the primary table. This sample shows the description and uses the state ID and country ID as the key. Finally, the slave lookup must set his master and request for the key to filter upon. In this sample, the state dropdown assigns the country lookup as master and receives the country ID to filter. No code required. That brings us to the end of this small sample about a chained dropdown. You can find more information about other components, features and usability in other videos. Thank you for watching.